Hello everyone and welcome back to the GradReady podcast. My name is Kaylee, I'm here with Jono, and today we're going to be talking about different essay styles and approaches for Section 2 of the GAMSAT. So before we get cracking, we're just going to start with a little bit of an introduction about ourselves. So as I said, my name is Kaylee and I am a newly graduated doctor from the University of Western Australia. My undergraduate degree was in biomedical science and I sat GAMSAT in September 2017. I'll pass on to Jono now to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name's Jono, as Kaylee introduced me, and I am a fourth year medical student in Macquarie University. My undergrad was doing biomedical engineering, combined it with medical science, and I did my GAMSAT in 2018.
Thanks, Jono. So today's session is going to be a bit of a Q&A style. So I'm going to be interviewing Jono here about different approaches to tackling Section 2 of the GAMSAT. So, Jono, what are the most common essay styles that people choose to use for the GAMSAT?
Well, generally there are, three major ones. So there's the first one's argumentative, the second one is personal reflective, and the third one is a creative essay style. So I'll just go through them very briefly. So argumentative is more factual, more objective. You're trying to make a point in your essay, and that's what a lot of candidates go for. Now, the second type is the personal reflective type, where you create your own anecdote, add a bit of your analysis to it, what you've learned through that anecdote and how you changed through that particular experience. And for some candidates it works really well, and I've known a few candidates that have struggled using that particular style. And lastly, creative essay styles. I think I've never come across it, but I've heard of candidates that do it, but it's mainly fictional. You can use a variety of structures, and the world is your oyster when it comes to creative essay styles. So you can do basically whatever you want. But it's really important to note when you utilize a creative essay style is that you need to respond to the stimulus and make sure you make a point at the end of it. So that's the important thing to note if you're particularly choosing to adopt a creative essay style.
Thanks, Jono. So what do these three types of essay styles have in common?
Well, I think it's really important. You're required to write 2 essays, so you need to respond to the stimulus, similar to when you did your HSC or whatever high school examination you did. You need to respond to whatever question you've been given. So for those of you who have not sat the GAMSAT before, basically Section 2, you'll be given 5 quotes, and generally those 5 quotes revolve around a central theme. And it is your task to write an essay responding to that theme to generate your own opinions. And the most important thing, and I cannot stress this enough, you need to try to make a point. And that point could be as simple as for or against. Now, I'm not going to give examples because I'm not very good at giving examples when it comes to writing essays, but you'll find that there is a general theme when you have those 5 key quotes, and you want to argue for and against. If you are arguing for, it's important that you back it up completely with good evidence. But it's always important, and same with medicine, to always weigh up the for and against when you tackle these kind of stimuli. If you're using a personal, reflective, and creative type of essay style, once again, you need to consider for and against when you tackle those kind of quotes. And you don't need to use all of the quotes, but it's good to use at least 1 or 2.
Yeah, and I'd probably say even the creative types also need to be pretty clear on sort of like what message they're trying to get across. Like, for example, if the quotes are about friendship and you wanted to write a story about how friendship is important for overcoming adversity, then you need to make sure that kind of comes across in the narrative that you're constructing. So,
Absolutely,
Jono,
absolutely.
what,
Yeah.
what would you say are the main differences in the structures between the styles?
I think regardless of what essay style you choose, argumentative, personal, reflective, or creative, you need to have clear paragraphs. So it needs to have structure when you do, particularly an argumentative essay. So you have an introduction, stating your thesis point. You have your body paragraphs. That can be 2 or 3. And within those paragraphs, you need to obviously provide some evidence, through any supporting literature that you found in your previous reading, and through all of that, your last paragraph would be a conclusion. If you're adopting a creative or personal reflective essay style, you can adopt a less structured essay, where you can have 1 to 2 stories, reflect on each, and then link them together. But I think, as Kaylee mentioned, you can get bogged down into not generating your point. So it's really important that you answer what the stimulus or the common theme that you're trying to get across, and utilize those quotes to your advantage. At the end of the day, all of these styles, you need a conclusion where you make your final key point that is clear, and reflective on the topic. So regardless of whatever style you choose, it's really, really important that you have a central thesis or central point that you want to get across to the reader. It takes a lot of practice, and it's something that I think Kaylee would agree with me, that it takes a lot of practice, and you need to share it with a lot of your friends, possibly senior lecturers or colleagues, someone who's got a bit more background in terms of understanding writing per se, because if you assess your own writing, that's not going to put you in good stead. So I think the GradReady forum where you can have your essay marked is really, really important, because you need that feedback to know, okay, that's where I need to work on. Oh, that part, I thought it made sense to me, but it actually didn't make sense to the marker at the other end. So it's really important that you get that feedback with whatever style you're electing to choose, and be comfortable writing in that particular style.
Yeah, and I think another good source for feedback. So I'm from the University of Western Australia, and they have a thing called Write Smart, where they have like academics who sit in the library at a certain time each day, and you can just literally just drop in and show them like your assignment or whatever, and they can help read it and give you some critiques about how well it flows and things like that. I'm not 100% sure they do it for like non-assignment things, but if your university has something like that, you could give it a shot and see if they will be happy to look over a couple of your practice essays for you. That could be a really good place to get some feedback on your writing from people whose job it is partly to give feedback on writing.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I wish I had that in my uni.
So, moving on, Jono, do you think that certain topics might be better suited to certain styles? And if so, what would you think would be the best like topics for each style?
Yeah, I think it always depends on the quotes that you're given. But I guess generally, if you wanted to put it into particular categories for the topics they present to you, you can have socio-political topics, global or national issues, whether it be war, natural disasters. I can't even think of anything else on top, but there's plenty more. So I think really important that you are comfortable with exploring different types of issues. So the things I just mentioned were quite factual, socio-political, global, national issues. So those are things you can research online. But when it comes to things more personal and reflective, like emotional, social, internal, or individual issues, that's where it requires a different type of writing. And that's where things like a personal reflective style may be more appropriate. So if you want to adopt an argumentative style, it's good that you use that kind of style for more objective or factual topics. So it is really important that you tailor what kind of style you want based on the stimulus that you've been given, and be comfortable to be writing in, I think personally, either an argumentative style or a personal reflective style, because I believe personal reflective and creative style can be kind of, they're one and two peas in the same pod. So it's really important that you're comfortable in writing both styles, because you may need to call upon either of them when it comes to tackling the stimulus to get more marks during the exam.
So we sort of talked a little bit about what all the structures sort of have in common, but what sort of components, like what sections do you think you need for each of the styles?
Yeah, so I think if we just focused on an argumentative essay style, being an engineer, we don't write a lot. So it was mostly, when I started studying for Section 2, it was mainly just pumping out essay after essay. So I would read about the latest news within, the Sydney Morning Herald, Dateline, the 7:30 report, and use that as evidence and stimulus for supporting my body paragraphs with my central thesis. So, when it comes to, let's say, for the argumentative essay style, and I don't know if Kaylee agrees, but what I did was I had one topic, let's say it was natural disasters, and I would create a brainstorm about what natural disasters could be talking about, whether it be the effect on the victims, whether it be the effect on the economic impacts, and you just create a network of ideas from that. And within that network, you have to back it up with evidence. So to put a long story short, when you tackle any argumentative essay, if you're choosing to use an argumentative essay, good to have 2 points for and 1 point against for what you're writing about. So if I'm writing a 5-paragraph essay about what's a topical issue at the moment, so let's say the floods that affected in central west New South Wales. So I would have an intro paragraph on the effect on what I want to focus my essay about based on whatever stimulus I'm getting given. My next 2 paragraphs would be supporting my argument, and then my 4th paragraph would be an argument against about my thoughts, just to show the marker that I'm demonstrating an ability to think more broadly and to consider counter arguments. And then the final paragraph would be my conclusion to sum it up. But that's just the general structure I would use for argumentative essay. With, let's say, a personal reflective one, I'm not too sure about this one, Kaylee, because I've never particularly pursued using a personal reflective essay, but I would imagine it would be something similar, where you have an intro, the 2 subsequent paragraphs would be supporting it. You have a counter argument in your 4th paragraph, and then the last paragraph would be just to sum up your opinions and key points.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd say for personal reflective style of essay, the overall structure tends to be very similar to an argumentative essay. The main difference is really the content of what you're talking about more than the structure. So for personal reflective essay, your examples are going to be more personal things, more of your own life stories rather than concrete hard facts about what percentage of people don't have friends or something if the topic's about friendship. Um, and then, of course, the last style, creative style. It can be pretty variable with creative style. So if you're writing a story, if you're or a poem or whatever, you can have all kinds of structures, but it should be easy for the marker to follow. They shouldn't be staring at the page wondering if you just gotten some alphabet soup and poured it on the paper. they should be able to follow what you're thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's one thing that we both want you guys to take away from it is that make sure you make your point. Whatever you write about, make sure you get your point across, because if you don't, what's the point of writing it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think as well. Like, when you write something, you're writing something to be read and understood by someone else. So if you write something, but it can't be read or understood, then, yeah, as Jono said, there's not really any point in writing it. So when you write, you have to write with an audience in mind. So moving on now. So first impressions are important in essay writing, just as in other areas as well. So, Jono, do you want to talk us through how you could structure an introduction?
Yeah. So, as I alluded to earlier, you want to have a clear opening thesis statement. Like, what are you talking about and why do I care? If you can answer those two questions, you'll be in good stead. You want to expand a little bit, add an explanation, bit of context, and just foreshadow to the audience or the reader as to what you're going to be talking about in the subsequent paragraphs. Because if you don't, I guess, grasp the attention of the reader in that first two sentences, generally they're going to lose a bit of impetus to read anymore. So really important, why are you writing about it, what are you going to write about, and why should I care? If you can answer those two questions, I think you will write a pretty decent introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. And once you've gotten the introduction down, how should you structure your body paragraphs?
Different ways. So if you can recall what you did in your high school essays, you have a topic sentence, which is similar to what you wrote in your thesis, and it's relevant to that specific paragraph you're going to be writing about. Once you've written that first topic sentence, you want to explain yourself, give a bit of evidence, whether it be through something you've read from the news, from a book, referring to a movie or a TV show, character, celebrity, or particular event in history. And you want to, give those examples, and more importantly, explain why that particular piece of evidence is relevant to supporting your point. You can add a bit more to that, but generally that's what you want to do in that initial paragraph, and you want in your last sentence should link it back to your thesis. So the mnemonic that we commonly use is CSEE. So you have your statement, you have your evidence, and then you have your explanation. If you can just follow those simple steps, I think that will give a lot of clarity in terms of how you write, and just gives a bit more fluidity and, I guess, cohesion as well when it comes to writing up your essay.
Thanks, Jono. And what about counter-argument body paragraphs? Would you say those are pretty similar, or are there any differences in how you should structure those?
Yeah, I would say pretty similar. I mean, you just want to, you can have a topic sentence that says, well, some may argue that, or be quite philosophical in that manner, but I think similar, you have your statement, you have your evidence, you have your explanation, and the evidence should provide a counter argument to whatever your thesis is or thesis statement is. So I think really important that you have a counter argument through your essay, because if you don't, it just doesn't show your depth of thought. So even if you can't think of one, just try to make something up in a way, because it just shows that you're thinking more broadly. And in medicine, what they're looking for is that you're not going to take every word that you say on the ward or from a lecturer for a grain of salt. You're going to read back and just double check. And that's part of being not just a good student, but just a good doctor moving forward, where you need to always follow evidence-based guidelines and refer to the latest guidelines to make sure you're doing the right thing. So always have the counter argument as a good way of showing that depth of thought, that ability to think more broadly.
So now we've spoken a little bit about the argumentative essays, so now we'll move on to talking a bit more about the reflective essays. So I mentioned, we were talking a little bit earlier about how the structure tends to be quite similar to the argumentative essays, but did you want to expand on that any further, Jono?
Yeah, a little bit, because I think it can be quite confusing as to which essay style we need to do. I think what Kaylee and I want to get across is that with a reflective essay, a personal reflective essay, there are many approaches to do it. So we're going to share with you two approaches. So the first approach is you can write a few paragraphs telling about a story, a character, a setting, or an issue, and how you resolve that issue. And you can have also a few paragraphs reflecting on the story and linking it back to a key argument on that topic, what you learnt about it, how you change, and what other people can learn from it. So that's one approach. In terms of, I guess, structuring that first approach, once again, you can have that first thesis statement followed by some subsequent body paragraphs talking about, what you've learnt, and then maybe your third or fourth paragraph about how you changed, and your final paragraph or your conclusion is about what other people can learn from your experience. That's something you could try. I'm not putting a golden rule that you need to write 5 paragraphs. You can write 4 paragraphs, but like I said, it's all about the quality, not the quantity. With the second approach with reflective essays, it's basically just mixing and matching. You can alternate the paragraphs to tell your story and analyze and reflect the story in whatever way you want. But I think it's really important that you don't get bogged down in losing the flow of your argument. You need to ask yourself, am I writing something that actually makes sense and makes a point? Or am I writing for the sake of writing? So that's the thing we both want you guys to take away from it.
Yeah, because you only have half an hour per essay essentially, so that's not a lot of time. So you're not going to have a lot of words, so you want to make sure that what you write is really tight and what you do have is all cohesive and relevant to the point that you're making. Moving along, so in terms of creative writing, what are the types of structures that you might find in creative writing, Jono?
Now, I have not touched creative writing before, and I've heard of one person who's done it, and he was very bold, but he was a very good writer. But there's so many ways to do creative writing. You can do a short story, a poem, a play, a script, dialogue, speech. The list goes on and on and on. But within these, I guess, particular styles of creative writing, there will obviously be different structures. So if you're writing a poem, you have to write in like rhyming. You can write it as a haiku, a sonnet. I don't know what other ones there are, but if you're writing a short story, make sure there's a beginning, middle, and end. There needs to be some kind of complication or a tension that needs to be resolved. And collecting different perspectives. And I guess sometimes you can use headings to make sure you are really clear as to what you're talking about. But then again, it's from a personal point of view, if you don't feel comfortable writing this kind of style, you don't need to. And I think you're very much entitled to just write a personal reflective style. I think what Kayla and I are just trying to share with you is that there are different styles of writing. The predominant ones are argumentative and personal reflective, but if you want to show something new to the marker or to the reader to get, earn even more marks, if you're really good at writing, you can adopt a creative writing style. But it's always about going with your own strengths if you feel comfortable doing it. So we can't stress enough where if you don't feel disadvantaged if you can't write a creative writing style piece, because that's not the point of section 2. Section 2 is the point is, can you get an argument across, and can you back it up with evidence that you're up to date with the information around you in the world that we live in.
Absolutely. And sometimes, depending on the stimuli that you get, you'll come up with ideas that maybe will be better suited to creative writing, or maybe will be better suited to personal reflective or argumentative style. So sometimes you might go in with a plan like, oh, I'm going to do this kind of style for this essay and this kind of style with this essay, but then when you actually see the stimuli, you might find a different style would suit you more. And it's by doing practice that you'll find out where your strengths and weaknesses lie and what type of writing suits you the best. I actually did do a more creative style for my task B. I wrote a sort of short story. It was autobiographical, but I told it in the third person so that the GAMSAT markers wouldn't know I was talking about myself. and that worked well for me for those particular quotes, but if they had given me different quotes, I probably wouldn't have picked that style. I might have picked something different. So make sure you practice a variety of different stimuli, a variety of different styles, and you'll be able to figure out what works best for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And moving on to back to more general topics. So, Jono, how can you make sure you maintain your structure under the time pressure?
It is very difficult. I believe you have a bit of reading time, and I think it's 5 minutes from what I could remember, because I'm so focused on tutoring section 3. And basically you also have a bit of, I guess, blank piece of paper on the side of your booklet where you can plot out your essay as to what you're going to write. And I really advise doing that, even though it's like 1 or 2 minutes. It really gives you that clarity in terms of what the hell I'm going to be writing about, because you can really lose your train of thought. So planning is really critical. How I approached the exam was basically you read those quotes in those first 5 minutes, or 10 quotes in the first 5 minutes, and you already know what kind of style you're going to be writing. You already know what kind of, I guess, quotes you're going to be mentioning, but it's important you write those thoughts and ideas down before you actually write it on the actual write your actual essay out. So just to give you a bit of I guess guidance as to what you're going to be writing about, because you can really lose yourself under the time, and by having that clarity you can just say, oh, I should mention that because I wrote it in my plan, that kind of thing. So it's really important to also take 5 minutes and refer back as needed. Look up at the clock just to check how much time you have left, whether or not you have time to write the extra point or the extra paragraph, because it's really important that you always have finished with a conclusion. Sometimes you've already made your point enough in the body paragraphs. There's no need for you to embellish it or elaborate anymore. It's important to always finish your argument. So I guess from my personal experience is make sure you have a very strong thesis argument. Your body paragraphs are there to support your arguments, but you need to also have a very, very strong conclusion. So your intro, your conclusion are the two most important paragraphs that you need to focus on. If you're running out of time, I would highly advise that you wrap up your body paragraphs as soon as possible. Even if you have failed to finish that point, you just want to write that conclusion just to tie everything up.
Thanks, Jono. So what's the best way to improve your structure when you're doing practice?
Practice. No, it's not rocket science. It's literally not rocket science. I think just in general, you need to, like Kaylee said, you need to get comfortable with the style of writing that you use for any particular quotes you've been given, and be accepting of feedback. It's so hard. You can get so disheartened when someone critiques it and saying, oh, I don't really understand what you're writing about. And that's the reality of it. Sometimes you you need to go back to the drawing board. And it's important that we've got GradReady is, I think, one of the best places where you can submit your essays and you get reviews almost instantly. You get feedback straight away as to how to improve. And that's the only way you guys can improve, by practicing, by getting that feedback and doing it again. So it's a cycle of success in a way, where you rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, and repeat. So that kind of attitude is really important. And if you find that you wrote a good paragraph, a decent paragraph, try to rewrite it again, see if you can make it better. And I guess the last point is, if you can have a bank of ideas and examples, and I think this is really, really important, where you have a list of other quotes or other key examples you can use for multiple purposes. I can't think of any on top of my head, but I'm sure they'll come to me later on in the day. But have that kind of bank in the back of your mind, where you can utilize different quotes, different historical events to supplement your argument or reflective piece for whatever context you need to do.
Yeah, and I guess another tip as well is that if there's a particular part of your structure that you know you don't do very well at, for example, if you know that you're not very good at writing introductions or you're not very good at writing topic sentences, then that's something that you can practice. Like, you can just do some focused practice where you just write introduction paragraphs or where you just write topic sentences, and that can help you make like quite a bit of gains in that particular area as well. I don't know if you have any other tips, Jono.
No, I think that's an awesome tip. I think I should have done that. That way I would have scored a bit better. But no, I think for those of you who have English as a second language, or are not very confident in writing, because I remember I was pretty crap at writing. I was good at numbers, but I hated writing, and that's normal. But what's important to learn from this is being able to get your point across, and just have that. If you can get that structure across, that's what they're looking for. That's 50% of the game. But to score, I guess, the higher, if you want to get, a 70 or above at least, you really need to have a bit more depth of reading. And the more you read or the more you watch, whether it be TV, YouTube, or whatever, it will hold you in good stead, because you begin to become more familiar as to what's important around the world, and you can utilize that when you develop your own arguments. So even if you're crap at writing, keep pursuing it, because in medicine moving forward, you'll be doing a lot of writing. So keep that in mind.
Thank you, Jono. And thank you to our lovely listeners for tuning in. It was great having you listen to the podcast, and we also thank all those who have been listening to all of our other podcasts as well. Be sure to follow GradReady on social media, and also check out our website as well, because we have quite a lot more resources to help you with your studies, including more blog posts and podcasts for study tips. And we also have our paid courses as well for those of you who want that little extra help. And the paid courses, some of them also include our essay marking service, where you can submit 10 essays and we'll mark them, and we'll give you quite detailed feedback as well on what you submit to us. So keep an eye out for our future episodes, and we look forward to seeing you again on our podcast. Thank you again for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.